I never thought I'd be told by my own family to stay silent, but there I was, standing in the middle of pastel balloons and baby shower decorations, hearing my daughter-in-law whisper words that cut straight to the bone. "Daniel, don't speak at the baby shower, you'll ruin it." I froze. For a moment, I wasn't even sure I'd heard her correctly. My son's wife, the mother of my soon-to-be grandchild, looked me dead in the eye with a polite but firm expression. There was no room for debate, no warmth in her tone, just a clear order: "Don't open your mouth, don't embarrass us." My name is Daniel Mercer, and I've never been much of a talker. At 58 years old, most of my life has been spent working with my hands rather than words. I built homes for a living, raised my son after his mother passed, and did my best to show love not through speeches but through actions. But still, to be told I wasn't even allowed to say a few words on one of the most important days of my life, that stung deeper than I cared to admit. Let me introduce you to the people in this story, because you need to know who they are to understand how we got here. My son, Ethan Mercer, is 32. He's the kind of man any father would be proud of. Hardworking, respectful, the type who always puts others before himself. I raised him to be that way after his mother died when he was only 12. I still remember him sitting at the kitchen table, small hands balled into fists, telling me, "Dad, I'll help you, I'll be strong." And he was. He's been my rock as much as I've been his. Then there's Kelsey, my daughter-in-law. She's 29, smart as a whip, and she's got a way of organizing every detail in her life down to the last napkin fold. To her credit, she's determined to make things perfect, especially when it comes to appearances. And I think that's where we clash. I'm simple, straightforward. I don't care if the balloons are baby pink or powder blue. But Kelsey? She wants flawless. She wants control. And somewhere along the way, she decided I didn't fit the picture. There were others in the room too, family, friends, cousins, neighbors. My mother, Ruth, was there, sitting quietly with her cane propped against her chair. She's 80 now, fragile but sharp as ever. She kept smiling at me from across the room, as if to say, "Don't let it get to you." My sister Linda, fiery as always, noticed the exchange between me and Kelsey and muttered something under her breath. She never could stand seeing me treated poorly. But in that moment I swallowed my pride. I nodded to Kelsey. I told myself, fine, I'll keep quiet, let her have her perfect day. Still, my heart ached. Here I was, a father about to become a grandfather, being told my words weren't welcome. Did she think I'd ramble? Did she think I'd embarrass Ethan? Or was it simply that I didn't fit the glossy picture she wanted for her friends and Instagram posts? As I sat there in that room filled with pastel streamers and fancy cupcakes, I felt invisible. I blended into the corner, just another body in the crowd. No one paid me much mind. And yet, tucked under one of the gift tables, wrapped in a plain white box with nothing flashy on it, sat my present to them. Inside that box was an envelope, and inside that envelope was something that would change their lives forever. I hadn't planned on making a big speech. I hadn't planned on taking the spotlight. All I wanted was to give my son and his wife the kind of gift most people only dream about. I thought maybe, for once, they'd look at me and see the father who worked himself to the bone so his family could have more than he ever did. But instead, I was silenced before I could say a word. The funny thing is, silence has a way of making people underestimate you. They think you have nothing to offer. They think they know your worth. But sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is just waiting for the right moment. And that moment would come when Kelsey opened my gift, read the card inside, and realized just how wrong she had been. Because once that envelope was opened, no one in that room would ever look at me the same way again. Before we get to that moment at the baby shower, you need to understand where I was coming from. Because this wasn't just about a party. It wasn't about balloons or cupcakes or speeches. For me, this was about family, legacy, and the years of quiet sacrifices that led up to that single day. My name's Daniel Mercer. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and if you asked anyone who knew me, they'd probably say the same thing. Daniel's a good man, doesn't talk much, but he works hard. And that's pretty much the truth. My life was never glamorous, but it was honest. I spent 3 decades as a construction foreman, building homes for other families while dreaming of giving my own son the kind of stability I never had. When my wife, Marlene, passed away from breast cancer 15 years ago, everything in my world shifted. Ethan was only 12 then, just barely a boy. I remember standing in the hospital hallway trying not to break down while he sat beside his mother's bed, clutching her hand. That night, when she was gone, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Dad, I'll help. I'll be strong for you." And somehow he was. He helped me pack lunches, he reminded me to pay bills when I forgot. He even cooked dinner some nights when I came home too tired to lift a hammer. So raising him alone became my life's purpose. Every late shift, every blister on my hands, every dollar I saved, it was all for him. And when he grew up, went to college, and eventually met Kelsey, I felt a strange mix of pride and fear. Pride that he'd made it. Fear that maybe I'd no longer be the center of his world. Now, don't get me wrong. Kelsey isn't a bad person. She's smart, ambitious, and she genuinely loves Ethan. But she's different from us Mercers. Where I come from, you work with what you have. If the tablecloth's got a coffee stain, you flip it over. If the car makes a noise, you turn up the radio until you can fix it. But Kelsey? She's from a world where things have to be curated, polished, presentable. Appearances matter more than comfort. And sometimes, when she looks at me, I can see it in her eyes, like I'm some rough edge she wishes she could sand down. Still, I wanted to be part of their world. When Ethan told me they were expecting, I can't even describe the joy that hit me. My boy, the same kid who once played baseball in the backyard with a duct-taped glove, was going to be a father. And me? I was going to be a grandfather. It felt like life had come full circle. That's when I started planning. See, for years I'd been renovating my parents' old house. It sat empty after my dad passed, a modest 2-story place with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Most people saw it as a burden, but me? I saw it as an opportunity. Every spare hour after work I put into that house. I replaced the roof, fixed the plumbing, sanded the floors until they gleamed like honey. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was a home, ready for the next chapter of our family's story. So when I learned Ethan and Kelsey were expecting, I made a decision. I'd give them that house, free and clear. A place to raise their child, a safe haven, a legacy, not in words but in bricks, beams, and deeds, the language I understood best. The day of the baby shower, I carried that secret close to my chest. I didn't tell a soul, not even my sister Linda or my mother Ruth. I wanted it to be a surprise. In my mind, I imagined the moment. Ethan and Kelsey opening the envelope, the room going quiet. My son realizing the years of sweat I'd poured into that house were now for him and his growing family. I didn't want applause. I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I just wanted to see his eyes when he realized what I'd done. But there was one thing I hadn't accounted for, Kelsey's desire for control. For her, this baby shower was her masterpiece. She had color-coordinated candy jars, custom-printed napkins, even a photo booth with a neon "Oh Baby" sign. And then there was me, the man she feared would stand up, ramble awkwardly, maybe say something that didn't fit her polished image. That's why, just before the event began, she pulled me aside and whispered those words, "Don't speak at the baby shower, you'll ruin it." I nodded, but inside, I was crumbling. I thought about all the nights I'd worked double shifts to buy Ethan new shoes, all the birthdays I'd gone without to make sure he had what he needed. And here I was, about to become a grandfather, being told to stay silent. I sat down at my table, clutching the envelope in my pocket. I told myself it didn't matter, that my gift would speak louder than any words ever could. But as I watched Kelsey laugh with her friends, posing for pictures, and as I felt my mother's eyes watching me from across the room, I wondered, had I already lost my place in my own family? Little did I know that Envelope was about to answer the question in a way no speech ever could. The baby shower was supposed to be a celebration, a joyful, light-hearted day filled with laughter, gifts, and family. At least, that's how I imagined it on the drive over. But the second Kelsey told me not to speak, the air around me changed. Suddenly, everything felt colder, like I was an outsider invited only because I had to be. The venue was a rented hall at a local community center. When I walked in, I was met with pastel balloons arching over the entrance, tables draped in pink and white tablecloths, and a dessert spread that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Rows of cupcakes lined with edible pearls, a chocolate fountain, plates of tiny sandwiches arranged in perfect circles. Every detail screamed, Pinterest perfect. And there I was, an aging construction worker in a simple button-down shirt, sitting among Kelsey's stylish friends with their manicured nails and boutique dresses. I didn't fit in, and I could feel it. Ethan spotted me and hurried over with that easy smile of his. "Dad, glad you made it." He clapped me on the shoulder, his warmth cutting through the chill I felt. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just happy to be here." But before I could say anything else, Kelsey swept in. She was radiant, I'll admit. Her baby bump framed by a floral dress, her hair curled perfectly, makeup flawless. She smiled at Ethan, then glanced at me with a tighter expression, like she was checking to make sure I wasn't about to step out of line. I stayed quiet, just like she'd asked. As the party kicked off, Kelsey mingled effortlessly. She laughed loudly with her girlfriends, posed in front of the photo booth, and made sure the playlist was upbeat. Every now and then, she'd shoot me a glance, quick and sharp, like a teacher making sure the quiet kid in the back wasn't about to cause trouble. I sank into my chair, trying to disappear, but Linda, my sister, wasn't having it. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice. "Why are you sitting there like a ghost? Go say something to Ethan. You're his father." I shook my head. Kelsey doesn't want me to, said I'd ruin things. Her eyes narrowed, jaw tight. That girl has nerve. "Linda," I said gently, "let it go. It's her day. I'll just wait." But inside, my chest burned. I thought of all the times I'd been there for Ethan, patching him up after football practice, working overtime to buy his first car, standing in the audience at his college graduation with tears in my eyes. And now, at the moment when I should have been celebrated as the father of the father-to-be, I was being told to stay in the shadows. Then came the gift opening. Everyone gathered around as Ethan and Kelsey sat in the center of the room, unwrapping presents piled high around them. Each time they opened something, designer baby clothes, a brand new stroller, a silver-plated rattle, the room erupted in oohs and ahs. Laughter, applause, compliments flew across the table. I clapped politely, but my mind kept drifting to the plain white box with my envelope tucked inside. It didn't sparkle. It didn't have a giant bow or a fancy bag. It just sat there quietly, waiting. When a friend of Kelsey's handed her my gift, she hesitated. She turned the box over in her hands, her brows furrowed slightly, like she'd been expecting something grander. "Oh, this one's from Daniel," she said, her voice neutral. I felt the room shift. A few of her friends glanced at me, their smiles polite but restrained. It was as if they too expected my gift to be something small, something humble, maybe even something embarrassing compared to the lavish items already opened. Kelsey slid the lid off the box. Inside was the envelope, plain, white, unmarked. She frowned slightly and held it up. "It's a card?" The words weren't cruel, but they carried a tone of disappointment, the kind of tone that makes you shrink in your chair. My heart pounded in my chest. I clenched my hands together under the table, willing myself to stay still, to not speak. Ethan reached over. "Babe, open it." Kelsey tore the flap and pulled out the folded paper inside. My handwriting, scrawled and a little uneven from years of working with calloused hands, stared back at her. She unfolded it slowly, eyes scanning the words. And then it happened. The silence. The laughter died, the chatter faded. The air itself seemed to pause. Kelsey's lips parted as her eyes darted over the page. Her hand trembled just slightly, and she glanced at Ethan with wide eyes. I could feel every gaze in that room shift to me, though I hadn't moved an inch. My chest tightened. This was it. The moment when my silence, my years of sacrifice, my decision to sit quietly in the corner would either condemn me or vindicate me. For a heartbeat, no one said a word. And then Ethan leaned forward, staring at the paper in disbelief. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. Is this real?" The conflict had reached its peak. I hadn't spoken a word all afternoon, but now, without saying anything at all, every eye in the room was on me. In that frozen silence, with every set of eyes drilling into me, I felt the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. My son's voice echoed in my ears. "Dad, is this real?" Ethan's hands shook as he held the deed, the crisp paper suddenly more fragile than glass. Kelsey's face was unreadable. Shock, confusion, maybe even disbelief. Her friends leaned closer, whispering, trying to peek at what she was holding. And me? I sat there, hands folded, back straight, heart pounding. This was the moment I had imagined countless times while sanding floorboards late into the night, while patching drywall until my arms ached. I had pictured handing Ethan those keys, telling him the house was his. I had imagined his smile, maybe even tears of joy. But instead of speaking, I chose silence. I could have stood up then, cleared my throat, explained myself. I could have told them about the hours I poured into that house, the money I saved, the sacrifices I made. I could have told them this gift wasn't about me. It was about Ethan, about the baby, about family. But I remembered Kelsey's words, sharp and clear. "Don't speak at the baby shower, you'll ruin it." So I didn't. Instead, I let the paper speak for me. I let my handwriting carry the weight of my heart. On that page were the simple words I had scrawled days before. For my son, Ethan, and his wife, Kelsey. This deed is yours now. May this house be the place where laughter fills every room, where arguments end with forgiveness, where your child always feels safe and loved. It isn't much compared to the world, but it is everything I can give. Love, Dad. Kelsey's lips quivered as she read the words aloud. Her voice cracked halfway through, and for the first time that day the perfectionist mask slipped. Her hands trembled as she passed the deed to Ethan, as if it were something too heavy to hold. Ethan stared at it like he was holding gold. His eyes glistened. He looked at me, then back at the paper, then at me again. "Dad," he said, louder now, "this is the house you've been working on?" I nodded once. Nothing more. A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. People gasped. Someone whispered, "He gave them a house?" Another voice added, "That's incredible." I kept my seat silent. My jaw tight, my chest tight, my whole body still, because I realized something. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to argue for my place in this family. The gift was the argument. The house was my voice. Linda, my sister, leaned closer to me, her eyes shining with pride. She whispered, "Good for you, Danny. That's how you show them." Across the room, my mother, Ruth, had tears streaming down her cheeks. She mouthed one word to me, "Proud." But I stayed still, because this moment wasn't about me. It was about Ethan, about the life he was about to start. Ethan stood, gripping the deed in one hand, his voice shaking. "You did all this? For us?" I met his eyes, my throat tightening, and I gave the smallest of nods. The turning point wasn't in the paper. It wasn't even in the deed. It was in my decision to let love speak louder than pride, to hold back my words, even when it stung, and let my actions carry the message. For years I had been underestimated, by Kelsey, maybe even by others in the family. I was seen as the quiet one, the rough one, the one who didn't fit in with the polished image. But in that moment, without a single word, I had shifted the room. The laughter had stopped. The chatter had died. All that remained was stunned silence and then the slow swell of awe. Kelsey's face softened, her eyes wet. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she pressed a hand to her chest, staring at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. And me? I just waited. Silent, steady, letting the moment breathe. Because I knew what was coming next, the climax, the explosion of emotion, the unraveling of all the assumptions that had hung over me. The deed had spoken, my son had heard, my daughter-in-law had realized. Now, it was only a matter of time before the room would erupt. The air in the room was so heavy you could almost hear people breathe. For the first time since I'd walked into that baby shower, nobody was laughing. Nobody was posing for photos. Nobody was sipping from pastel-colored punch cups. Every eye was locked on Ethan, on Kelsey, and finally, on me. Ethan rose from his chair slowly, the deed trembling in his hands. His face was pale, his eyes wide, his voice breaking. "Dad, you gave us a house? A whole house?" The words echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep calm. I wanted to speak, wanted to tell him how much I loved him, how long I'd been waiting for this moment. But again, I held back. My silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was power. So I simply nodded. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, even applause. Someone clapped first, then another, and soon the sound grew until it filled the hall. People craned their necks to look at me, the quiet man in the corner they had barely noticed all afternoon. Kelsey's eyes shimmered as tears threatened to spill. She turned the deed over in her hands like she couldn't believe it was real. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." I leaned back in my chair, my hand steady now, and answered in the calmest voice I could muster. "Then don't say anything. Just take care of each other, that's all I ask." Ethan couldn't hold back anymore. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug so tight it nearly knocked the wind out of me. He buried his face into my shoulder like he was a boy again, not a grown man about to become a father. "Dad," he choked out, "you've given me everything. You worked your hands raw just to raise me, and now this? I don't deserve it." I gripped his back, my own voice rough. "You do, son. You deserve all of it. You've made me proud every single day." The applause swelled around us. I heard Linda sniffle loudly, clapping her hands together with fierce pride. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother Ruth dabbing her tears with a handkerchief, her frail shoulders trembling with emotion. And then there was Kelsey. She hadn't moved from her seat. Her friends sat in stunned silence around her, their perfect smiles fading into wide-eyed disbelief. Slowly, she stood, her hands trembling as she held the paper. She looked at Ethan, then at me, her face red with shame and something else. Guilt. She walked toward me, her voice shaking. "Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I thought you'd make this about you. I never realized—" She paused, her throat tightening. "I never realized you were giving us everything." Her words hung heavy in the air. For the first time since she joined our family, I felt like she truly saw me. Not as the rough, awkward man who didn't fit her perfect world, but as the father who had given everything for his son. I gave her a small smile. "Your family. That house is yours now. I just hope it gives you what I tried to give Ethan, a place where love comes first." Her tears finally spilled, and to my surprise she leaned forward and hugged me. Tentatively at first, like she didn't know if I'd accept it, but I did. I patted her back gently, and when she pulled away her eyes were red, her expression softer than I'd ever seen. The whole room had shifted. The same people who barely noticed me when I walked in were now watching with admiration, even awe. They whispered words like, amazing, unbelievable, and what a father. And yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was Ethan's arms around me, the look in his eyes, the gratitude I could feel pouring out of him. "Dad," he said again, his voice stronger now, "I'll never forget this. I promise I'll take care of that house. I'll raise my kid in it the way you raised me, with love." I finally let a smile spread across my face. "That's all I've ever wanted, son." The applause grew once more, this time louder, more genuine. Even Kelsey's friends clapped, some of them wiping their eyes. The baby shower, which had started as a polished, picture-perfect event, had transformed into something raw, something real. I had been told to stay silent, to not ruin the day, and yet, by saying almost nothing, I had given the day its most unforgettable moment. The applause faded into warm chatter, but the atmosphere in the room never went back to what it was. Something had shifted permanently. The baby shower that had started as Kelsey's perfect display of control had turned into something raw, something unforgettable. And I knew in my heart that nothing between us would ever be quite the same again. Ethan didn't let go of me for a long time. Even when he finally stepped back, he kept a hand on my shoulder like he was afraid I might disappear. His voice was steady now, but his eyes still shone. "Dad, I promise I'll take care of that house. I'll make it a home the way you always wanted. And I'll raise my kid the way you raised me, strong, loved, and never doubting where they belong." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer right away. That was all I had ever wanted, for him to feel secure, for him to know he was never alone. Kelsey stood quietly nearby, the deed clutched against her chest. Her cheeks were still wet with tears, but there was something different in her expression. The pride and perfectionism that usually framed her every move had softened into humility. She approached me carefully, almost timidly, as though she wasn't sure if I would welcome her after everything she'd said to me earlier. "Daniel," she whispered, "I was wrong. I judged you, and I kept you at arm's length because I thought you wouldn't understand me. I thought you might embarrass me. But today, I saw who you really are. You gave us more than we could ever ask for, and I treated you like you didn't matter." Her words pierced me deeper than her earlier command to stay silent, because now they weren't sharp, they were raw, honest, a confession. I placed a hand on her shoulder and gave her a small, forgiving smile. "Your family, Kelsey, that's what matters. We all make mistakes. What counts is what we do after." Her eyes filled again, and she nodded. For the first time, she looked at me not like an outsider, but like someone she wanted to belong to. Around the room, people were still buzzing. Linda leaned across the table, practically glowing. "Danny, you showed her. You showed everyone. You didn't need a speech. You let the deed do the talking." My mother, Ruth, looked at me with tired but bright eyes. "Son," she said softly, "sometimes silence carries the strongest voice. You did good." I'll never forget those words. Because in the end, she was right. The rest of the shower felt different. It wasn't about the balloons or the photo booth anymore. People came up to me one by one, shaking my hand, patting me on the back, telling me how incredible the gift was. For the first time that day, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the quiet man tucked away in the corner. I was Daniel Mercer, father, grandfather-to-be, and the man who had given his family a foundation to build their lives on. As the event wound down and people began leaving, Ethan walked out with his arm around me. Kelsey held the deed like it was more precious than gold, and I noticed her looking at me differently, grateful, softer, as though she had finally opened her heart. When I got home that night, I sat alone in my chair, the silence of my house wrapping around me. For years, I had worried that I would lose my place in Ethan's life once he started his own family, that maybe I wouldn't be needed anymore. But that day showed me something different. My role wasn't gone, it had just changed. I wasn't raising Ethan anymore. Now I was giving him the tools, the foundation, to raise his own child. And Kelsey? I realized she wasn't my enemy. She was just someone trying to control her world, maybe out of fear of not being enough. In a strange way, I understood her better after that day, because I too had spent my whole life trying to control what little I could, working long hours, saving every penny, patching every wall, just to make sure my son was safe. The lesson hit me hard as I sat there that night. Love doesn't always need words. It doesn't always need speeches or grand displays. Sometimes love is silent. Sometimes it's an envelope on a gift table, a house deed hidden in plain paper, or a father sitting quietly in the corner until the right moment arrives. At the baby shower, I didn't ruin anything by speaking. I didn't ruin anything by staying silent either. What I did was let my actions carry the weight of my love. And in the end, it wasn't just Ethan who heard it. It was Kelsey. It was my family. It was every single person in that room. So if you ask me what I learned, it's this. Silence isn't weakness. Silence isn't absence. Sometimes silence is strength, and sometimes silence is the loudest way to say, I love you. And that's the story of how my daughter-in-law told me to stay silent at the baby shower, and how the silence ended up saying more than any speech ever could. Family isn't about who talks the loudest, who looks the best, or who controls the spotlight. It's about love, quiet, steady, unshakable love. That day, I didn't ruin the baby shower. I gave my son and his wife a home and a future, and in return they gave me something just as valuable, a place in their hearts. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own family, or if you've ever felt overlooked but knew deep down your love mattered, then I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been underestimated, only to prove people wrong with your actions? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video. It helps more people find it. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that actions speak louder than words, share this video with them. And finally, if you want to hear more real, emotional stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this storytelling journey. Until next time, take care of each other, and remember, sometimes silence speaks louder than words.